say aye. Aye. You agree, Rich? Minutes approved?
Aye.
Okay. Approve agenda. Sheila, anything else?
No, I do not have anything to add.
Anything for the board members? If not, a motion to approve agenda. Motion by, okay, motion by Steve, second by Rich. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Approved. Agenda, consent item. Sheila.
I have, the bills payable. Okay, I need to hand out we have an amendment to the bills payable. RMB sent another invoice after the packets were sent out. And I also have an additional payment from MVTL Laboratories. They're associated with the 319 grant. This was for basal stock nitrate tests. And so all the changes are in the red, and the agenda or the bills payable that I passed them out.
Rich, we're just doing the bills payable. Any questions on that? Okay, there were just a couple.
Yeah, and I sent those to Rich this morning.
Sheila sent them to you, so pretty much any questions by other board members? If not, I need a motion to approve. So motion by Steve, second by James. All in favor say aye. 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 Anybody opposed? Opposed? Carries. Board reports. We'll go quick. James, get anything?
Oh, yeah, I did a couple well ceilings in September, a couple erosion projects, and also approved a memorandum of agreement with USDA, which was the drop turkeys and timber project. So,
Lynn, get it?
Nothing really unusual. Of course, we're done on our surveys for all Minnesota Whitewater, whatever it's called. That was supposed to propose to the legislature.
Resolutions?
Yeah, what's that?
Resolutions?
Resolution, sorry. I don't know what that means, so.
Okay, Rich, you got anything for board reports? This is pretty much standard here so far. Need my address? Need my address? Okay. Sounds like, Steve, anything?
Two items. We had, I think we're going through the same thing Bob County went through with rain, or the sand from the dredging, trying to figure out a place to put that. So that's, our board's been spending a fair amount of time with places where that sand could possibly go and how we're going to handle that. And then our board made our appointment to the Mississippi River Water Winona Crescent County Board appointment. They appointed Marie Cavesi from the city of Winona. And I would like to have done that, but city wanted someone from the city on the board, so we do that.
So was it dredging the Mississippi? See?
Yeah,
Down around the Winona area?
yeah, pool 6.
No.
Well, yeah, so we've got a big pile of sand that's been dealing with for years, and there's kind of going through that sand and ongoing. Where do we go on that? Bob Shop spent quite a bit of time with that, right? Yeah. Finally found a solution, though, right?
I believe so, yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay, I just have, like Rich said, CARES Act, we're doing a second round of that, so I think most people are familiar with that. All the counties are kind of the same format on that. Okay, we'll go next to the board discussion and action items. Financial update. Sheila.
Okay, we have, for our financial updates, for the statement summaries in the packet were for August and September. our total of our checking and money market came to 183,000. That was at the end of August. By the end of September, when those checks from our last meeting were cashed, it was down to 178,000. We still have $95,755 in unearned income. That was from the drinking water protection grant that we have. Less that for August, our total is $87,259. And for the end of September, after checks cashed, $82,883.
Any questions on the financials? The only thing I brought, I know you sent in budgets, we have budgets for each year.
Yep.
We have, well, same as this year for Homestead County.
Okay.
So, for the other counties, it's just Homestead. So,
Yep.
I don't think anything's changing for anybody, is it? Steve, you know?
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and my request was the same as before. It hasn't changed in 10 years.
And Sheila, I don't think you'd have to come if needed.
Okay, and when were they planning on doing that
Well, it's
then?
like the middle of November now.
Okay,
But I would double check, but
okay,
I don't think there's a huge, if you want to check, you're welcome to
Okay.
come. I don't think it's necessary.
okay.
Okay, financial update. Next one, audit, excuse me, audit review.
Yes, I got the audit at their last meeting. The audit representation letter was signed, and then we have the audit draft, and I included that in your packets. I reviewed it and compared it to last year's, and the only difference from last year's is there were some paragraphs or some language concerning the unearned income. And last year for 2019, we didn't have any unearned income related to grants, so that was pulled out. And our overall balance was higher this year than last year at the end of the year. Otherwise, their end of the report was they saw nothing that was out of the ordinary that would lead them to believe that, that we documented our deposits as required and accounted for the payments made. And something that they always make at the last paragraph of the audit was that they note that there's just one person doing the checks and the billings and everything, which they say is not unusual for an organization that's small. However, I do feel like, I do have Wanda at SWCD overseeing what I'm doing with the books, and she prints out the checks for me, and so she helps me with the journal entries and things like that. So yes, technically it's just me, but I do have a really wonderful right-hand person to help me.
That's an unavoidable problem, it seems,
Yeah.
in a small community, even the school board. is different.
Yep. It is.
Sheila, you said that let's see, we having to dig through it. The balance at the end of the year was higher this year. How much was it higher than the year before, roughly?
I wanted to say it was like, 50,000 or 40,000 higher, but that was, and it's all because of the way the grant cycle, whatever you have at balance, so
Well, I almost asked a question when we were at the financial update. The, what was it, 82,000 that we're at now? It's not really a question, but a comment for an organization this size, that seems like plenty of that comes.
Yeah, and it's just, like I said, it's all related to grants, and what you have in the bank on December 31st isn't always reflected, because you could be in the middle of a grant and you have it in the account, but it's accounted for, so if it were to be spent, it would be gone.
Rich, we're looking at the audit review and financial update. You got any questions for that?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. We need a motion to pass this audit review.
Sure.
James?
So moved.
Okay, motion by James, second by Steve, to approve the audit review. Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. B, 319 nitrogen reduction grant update.
Okay, this is for the cover crop payments. I've got the paperwork for one cover crop payment. I'm passing that around. And this will be an individual from Olmsted County. And this is the third cover crop payment to this individual. So this is the third year that he or she has done cover crops in fields. And so Angela was able to get me that paperwork, and she said the others are coming, but weren't able to have them ready for this meeting. I'm sure people are busy in the fields, and I'll take care of that paperwork later. And this person planted almost 35 acres, which is kind of nice to see, because if they plant extra more than the 30 acres, I can count that as match that extra acreage that they planted.
Rich, we're just looking at the nitrogen cover crop payment. We only have one person that is, what do I want to say?
Submitting their
so far.
paperwork, yeah.
So far. So we're going to make a motion to approve that here in a second after James looks at it. Any questions on that? Yeah, Sheila said it, just a busy time of year, a lot of the applications aren't in yet, I guess I would say, or completed.
The paperwork
The
completed.
paperwork isn't done. You're correct. They'll show up, I'm sure, late December. Do you have any idea how many are in the process?
I think we've got 14 total contracts.
Okay, there's 14 total contracts, so they'll be coming minus this one today, I imagine. So,
Okay, all right, thank you.
any questions? Not a motion to approve that?
I think so moved.
Oh, go ahead. Motion by Steve, second by Lynn. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. C, surface water assessment grant update.
Okay, and one of the grants that the Whitewater was administering is the Surface Water Assessment Grant, and this is the one working with the PCA to help gather data for their assessments for the Mississippi River Winona and the La Crescent watersheds. And so our partners were Wabasha County SWCD and Root River SWCD in Winona County, and we monitored altogether 8 different sites this summer, up to 12 times. Some sites were only done 11 times. We collected stream transparency measurements and did a visual assessment of the stream condition, and we collected water samples that were sent to a lab for analysis for E. coli, total suspended sediments, and we did chloride and bacteria. And so anyway, all those were sent in, and we got the results of all that data, but it's right now MPCA will keep it, and then we'll do another year of assessments next summer, and then at that point in time MPCA will start assessing the data and reviewing it to determine if these stream reaches are meeting water quality standards. And the one thing that I did include in the packet was, I just thought it was kind of interesting. I did a summation of the 5 stream sites that are in the Whitewater watershed. 2 sites on the South Branch, 1 on the Middle Branch, 1 on the North Branch, and 1 on the main stem by Highway 61. And I know we've had discussions about the North Fork always seeming to be a little bit cloudier than the other 2 branches, and that did seem to hold true when you looked at the data. the lowest measurement of all the sites for one day was only 2 centimeters. We have this tube that we put the water into the stream water into the tube, and then you have this little disc to try and see how far you can see through that column of water. And it measures the amount of total of suspended sediments that are in that water that are making it cloudy. So the cloudier it is, the lower the transparency, the lower the water quality. But of course, the MPCA will assess it. So this is just very, very preliminary data. I'm just noting that it appears that the lower North Fork seem to have cloudier conditions or worse conditions than the other two branches, the middle and the south. So anyway, that for what it's worth, this is by no means conclusive. You know, this data will be compared with the water samples that we collected as well and the lab analyzed. But this was something that we noted, and I know that when we were out, anytime, you know, we were always taking bets on, well, what do you, now that we know what the south and middle branch transparencies are, I wonder what it's going to be in the North Fork. And sure enough, you know, so we try and estimate what it was before we got there.
Just a little bit of informational context, I guess. The rye seed sales is really going up a lot, so a lot more people must be putting in cover crops.
Ah.
But as far as like no-till, at least in our neighborhood, it seems like it's expanding out quite a bit. But I think if more no-till could get done, I think that would probably what we really need for the summer.
Mhm.
So, for at least some farmers.
Yeah. And it might be that what's going on in the North Fork has nothing to do with what's going on in the fields. It could be a lot of redeposited stream bank erosion, as you know, every time you have a rain event, it just keeps going downstream. So
That's probably unavoidable, really.
yeah,
isn't
of
it?
course.
I mean, 'cause
Yeah.
the Mississippi's changed source and different things over the last hundreds of years.
Yeah.
When you get this data though, I think there wasn't no really major rain events this year.
No,
I would think
there
the
weren't.
water quality would probably be one of the better.
There were a lot.
Years or-
Yep. And you could see that, you know, 3 of the sites had, in fact, the Middle Fork, the median measurement was greater than 100 centimeters, which is the highest it can be. So that was the average. So more than half of the readings on the Middle Fork when we were doing the measurements this summer were at the highest point. So that, and we could tell, you know, right away in the spring, that's when they were lower, but as things were drying up and we weren't getting those rain events, the clarity of the water was very good on many days.
Are these all being taken on the same day?
Yes. Yep. Yep. And so we had designated dates. I had to pick the dates ahead of time, so that so even if it was raining, we still had to be out there. And there was just one day where measurements were taken, and we were just about done before it started to rain. So.
I've been doing a little research just for my own information, but amazingly, every 1% increase in organic matter of soil, it can hold 16,500 more gallons of water. So I mean, those sorts of things help a lot in the aspect of runoff. So that's something to shoot for.
Mm-hmm.
Rich, we were talking about the water quality this year, and Sheila, on her data and testing this year, we're looking at the clarity of the water this year, and it seemed to be a better year for the Whitewater. And the discussion was obviously no major rainfalls, but we'll get more information on that when the PCA gets done looking at this. Is that what
Yep.
we have, Sheila?
Yep, and they will look at the data after next year's monitoring season. So they'll use 2 years of data.
Okay, PCA puts 2 years of data together, look at the water quality.
This is only clarity, not quality, right? I mean, this isn't saying
Right.
this isn't
Correct.
saying about what
Correct.
pollutants could be in there.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Oh,
Your
my
good
mistake.
clarification.
I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
Visible sediment.
Well, this is just the clarity, but the other samples that we collected get
Yeah,
to the
this
point.
doesn't speak to, this doesn't speak
Correct.
to if there's E. coli in it or
Right.
whatever else we can.
Yep.
It's just saying
Mhm.
low turbidity,
Yep,
low rain.
yep,
all
correct.
details.
Okay, anything else in that, Sheila?
No.
Okay. Informational, we'll hear more on that later.
Mhm.
Next, go ahead, Rich. Yep, Rich, go ahead.
What we're doing is actually working.
What is working?
What we're doing is working.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, what we're doing is, I think so. I think, like Lynn just said, cover crops are growing. That is helping immensely, I believe, in the area. So,
Oh, yeah.
okay, next we have the Mississippi River Winona Crescent Watershed Update. Sheila?
Yes, just wanted to, I included a memo in the packets regarding the One Watershed, One Plan planning grant for the Mississippi River, Winona, and La Crescent watersheds. And I had submitted a proposal for the last funding round with Bowser, and we got awarded. So the partners that would be involved would be, since the watershed covers 4 counties, would be the SWCDs and the counties. There'll be Winona, Olmsted, Winona, and Houston. Also the Stockton, Rolling Stone, Minnesota City Watershed District, and the city of Winona has expressed an interest in being involved. So anyway, what I included in the packets was just a very brief summary of when One Watershed, One Plan has been worked on in other parts of the state, how other multi-county entities have been involved. And so I thought that would be good to see, because that's what we are, is multi-county, 3 counties. It's not the 4 counties of the planning area. And so just to review really quick, I think the most perfect case was the Pomme de Terre River watershed. They completed a One Watershed, One Plan planning grant, and I believe they're done now, right, Adam? Yes. And so the Pomme de Terre Association of Minnesota is a joint powers board, just like the Whitewater. So they've been around for a while, and when the One Watershed, One Plan concept came down the pike, their watershed boundary, or their jurisdictional area, happened to exactly match the One Watershed, One Plan planning boundary. So it fit like a glove, so that joint powers board, their board members acted as the policy committee and did the planning process. And so that made sense. And I think Rich, is he talking? Okay. And so that was one example. And then the other example was the Greater Blue Earth River Basin Alliance. They are also a joint powers board, and they cover, I believe, 10 counties. And when the Wantonwan River Watershed started their One Watershed, One Plan, the Gerberga Joint Powers Board was involved, and now that plan is complete, that Joint Powers Board is doing the fiscal and the administration on behalf of that watershed. But you notice in the map that they have 3 major watersheds that are in their jurisdictional area. And the concept for this particular Joint Powers Board is that over time, they would, as the other 2 watersheds get their One Watershed, One Plans done, that this one Joint Powers Board would kind of be the umbrella for doing the fiscal and the administration for those 3 major watersheds. And I think in our funding round, when we got awarded for this watershed, the Le Sueur River watershed was also in that funding round. So they'll be starting theirs very soon as well. So that's just the other example. And then but that this watershed had a much larger boundary than the particular one watershed, one plan that was being worked on. And then the other example was the Hawk Creek Watershed Project, which is a joint powers board. Their jurisdictional area was smaller than the one watershed, one plan for the Hawk Creek and the Middle Minnesota River. So that was a combined watershed, so they were obviously didn't cover the entire plan area, and they weren't the same size, they were smaller. And so they're not done yet with their plan, but right now the Hawk Creek Watershed Project, they have representation on the advisory committee during the planning process. So those are just the three examples that I saw for multi-county entities in elsewhere in the state. But right now the Whitewater Joint Powers Board does not have to be involved. And obviously we have a smaller coverage than the entire watershed area for this particular planning process that I'll be involved with. So it looks like you're more kind of fitting into the camp of being like the Hawk Creek watershed, being represented somehow on the advisory committee and with the concerns of this particular watershed. And I don't know, Adam, did I miss anything? Is there anything else that I could add?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. Each member of your joint powers board will be representing their individual county or SWCD
Right.
on that policy committee already.
But there's no voting, this board is not being asked to sit on this
No.
watershed, right?
Right, because our members are already represented in the other participating entities, the counties and
Okay,
the
so-
SWCDs.
You know,
This is what you were talking about at first, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it clearly, so the city of Winona, they had city council members writing to our board, please appoint a city of Winona commissioner to this board. Don't allow it to, you know, I'm a conservative trying to kind of protect taxpayers' dollars. I'm sure they don't like that, so they want someone who's, you know, more of a cheerleader for the whole process. But more importantly, Winona is a voting member of this. They're one of the cities that gets to vote. Now they're stacking that with Winona City commissioners on top of that and taking all of the rural representation that I would represent in western Winona County, denying us to be able to participate. And if you think that it's not going to come down to them trying to hijack revenue stream to get the lake, you know, their healthy Lake Winona is what they're trying to bring, and that's fine, and that should be addressed, but it shouldn't. This whole process is just kind of playing out as I had predicted a long time ago. That we used to have willing participation, we didn't have those targeted areas, and everyone was able to make applications, and now I feel like I'm losing representation. Western Winona County is less represented. Whitewater Joint Powers is not on this board. City of Winona is stacking up both a city vote and a city commissioner vote and denying the rural area to be part of it. So I think you'll see this play out a lot more, and you'll see a lot more in the future of pitting people and governments against each other. And I don't feel good about it at all, but that's my opinion of how it's going.
So, and so this Mississippi, this formulation, one water, is basically is what the Root River has done, the Zumbro is doing now, but this is the Mississippi quadrant explanation.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of, how's that want to go forward, correct? Are we saying?
Right. You applied for a planning grant to start a one watershed plan process, like what's done in the Root and Zumbro is nearly done with theirs.
Well, the Zumbro, I don't, well, this is where Olmsted County will be going, I'm almost sure. Because when we did the river, we did a joint powers agreement. I guess that's what we call it.
Yep.
Now, last week, we reviewed the Zumbro and we did the same thing. We voted to do a joint powers agreement. So, I don't think Olmsted County, we're talking about urban commissioners, they will probably go the same direction as you proceed, a joint powers agreement, where basically if you get the grants, great, here's the criteria, but it still comes back to the individual counties to decide. Is that?
That's how,
And
yes.
so right now, you're just starting the planning process
Yeah.
for this, so that operates under a memorandum of agreement. It's a pretty informal agreement to
It's
just work
informal.
together. As you plan together, you can have those discussions on how you'd want to implement together, like the Zumbro just had. And as you mentioned, the Roots operated under kind of a collaboration, joint powers agreement, and the Zumbro just made that decision that that's the direction they want to go as well.
And that's the way it goes, because I'll have to agree with some of Steve. Winona is a block, so will be the city of Rochester, a block of these water things. So that's what the future is going to bring in these agreements. You'll have to make Rochester happy. They got the votes. And that sounds like Winona, city of Winona, the same thing.
They put 2 votes on it, commissioner and the city. They
It
get,
could be. So, as Bowser looks at these things, you're gonna have more interpretation, urban versus rural, in the future. Root River is mostly rural, Zumbro is mostly rural and small towns, but now you're dwelling into watersheds with 2 major cities, and you got a whole different world of
And
things to
that's-
jump through.
And that's one thing that I thought about too. And so one of the things that I did do was go through to see what other watersheds are doing in this process. And one of the things that I kind of caught my eye, and I think it's a good idea in the advisory committee capacity, having input specifically from cities, like the city of Altura has issues, Lewiston, Stockton has flooding concerns. Having input from cities as a subcommittee of the advisory committee, and then having a subcommittee of the farmer groups, the farmers, the union, and the corn growers, just trying to, so that we have meetings that are dedicated just for their concerns, to get those inputs and to review the data with respect to them. So that's one of the things I'm thinking of trying to.
there's no power, they have no will.
No, but an advisory committee to.
I know, which is fine, but I'm just saying, you have a whole different logic when you get to the big urban.
Yeah.
Because I deal with Rochester, and it's, the final say will be the Rochester City Council. That's just the way it is. So however this thing is set up, or whatever you're gonna do.
Right, well, for the Zumbro in their case, where they have the city of Rochester on the policy committee, having a joint powers collaboration would be the same decision-making that the ROOT has, where everyone gets one vote on that table. So far how it's worked for the ROOT is they've worked well together, and they're not just focusing on one specific county. It's been some priority sub-watersheds that have been identified throughout the area. And the discussions with the Zumbro, at least with the staff, have been similar, where they're not going to just focus one individual county, that they would involve the partners to the extent that they can to cover the biggest priorities throughout the watershed.
Well, I know, the root is, the people involved, kind of a different, we're all kind of, I would say, about the same, either small town
Yeah.
or rural. But once you get city charters involved, or city policies, you're gonna have different dynamics. So that's plain and simple.
Sure.
I don't know. I think Steve's trying to, that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I feel like Western Winona County just got taken out of the process and given 2 votes to Winona. They got they got their city commissioner. Now they voted the city commissioner to be a vote, plus the city gets to have a vote in that too. So city of Winona gets 2 votes and Western Winona County gets 0. That's how that went.
No, okay. But anyway, as this goes forward, this planning group, obviously, I'm just saying that's the dynamics. The other question is, if this gets going in a year or 2, where does that put the Whitewater watershed entity?
That's up to your entity. When you have that discussion, how the partnership that's involved in planning here, how do they want to implement together? They can have that conversation. Does your board stay the same, which that's up to you, and you simply sign an agreement to collaborate with the other partners. So you have Houston County and the River SWCD are outside of this board. So do they sign on an agreement that you're going to work together? You could go that way. You could revisit your board. That's again your decision. So it's really how you guys want to.
Well, I know you can collaborate with all you want, but I'm looking at it more of the financial. Does that put the Whitewater board into another, we're competing against other entities for the dollar?
No, so the money you would receive from Bowser to implement this plan, you would have to identify a fiscal agent. So in the RUT, that's been Winona SWCD gets it, and then you have sub-agreements with the rest of the partners to implement the projects. That would be the same with the Whitewater planning area here, is you need to identify a fiscal agent to receive the grant, and then you can move it around to the individual partners that have projects identified. So the joint powers board could be part of that.
Mike, I understand that.
We have no vote, there's no vote from Whitewater Joint Powers on that, on the new watershed.
For planning purposes, because you're already represented. After the plan's completed, and
Where is Western Winona County represented?
Winona County has a vote at the table.
Yeah, the city commissioner that they just took away from a rural commissioner, yeah.
And
It's the same playing field for every county, every SBC involved, that we ask to have
I'm
one.
just showing you how it's played out.
I think we're telling you how the politics play out.
I
That's what we're telling you.
Let me throw this out there.
The-
I'm by no means an expert, but as I see it, cities have the issue of constriction when it comes to water flow, rain events, whatever. They get too greedy for property, too close to the river. That's what causes the trouble. Now, on the other end, we're trying to have more organic matter, better waterways, things like that, slow the flow down. And there's these intermediary projects like Rochester builds the big ponds, to stop the flow and let it build up. Well, the trouble is, in the city, where they want to have all the property, ends up being a concrete sluice gate, so it goes through the city. That costs a ton of money. It doesn't really do any good where the real problem is.
Upstream.
So that's why I agree with you that there should be representation to actually solve the problem upstream, not where someone can afford a concrete sluice gate to shoot it through the city, because we're still not saving our water for crop use or whatever down the road.
And it made sense, River 1-1, how that played out was Marcia Ward was representation because the city of Winona was not in that watershed. Now, this watershed, the city of Winona is in, and they asserted right away, we have 3 votes, you only have 2. We're taking that away from Western Winona County. We're taking that position, plus we get the additional position of the cities that get to have a vote. So Winona is one of those cities that gets to have a vote. And I'm powerless here. We don't have a seat at the table. Whitewater Joint Powers doesn't have a vote at that table. So I just feel like it's stripping policies that have been set up that work good, and I'm just saying that's how it's playing out. And I predicted it, and I think it's going to get a lot. I think you're going to see more.
Okay, well, again, it's, my follow-up is, the Mississippi watershed gets going, I'm afraid the Whitewater Power Board will be squeezed out or ignored or just won't be as valuable as it has been. That's how I see this playing out. So, you can tell you whatever you want, but
I guess I myself don't see that being the case. I understand the concerns that you don't have a specific person on your policy committee member, but.
How do we get funding?
What's that?
How do we get funding here now? We have to compete with the Mississippi 101 La Crescent, right? I mean, that's,
They don't get funding. This is just a policy committee, it's not a joint powers organization. So Winona County has applied.
ultimately, in 2-3 years, that's where it's going. That's what,
They'll have to make a decision on how they want to work together. So again, if they went the route of collaboration, they would have to identify a fiscal agent to receive that grant and then share it with the partners. So that conversation hasn't happened. That's something we would look to have during the planning process of how you guys want to work together.
well,
That's happening now.
But the thing is, you have to compete for the grant. The watersheds will be competing with a limited number of grants. That's the way I see it. If you got 20 watersheds competing for possibly 2 grants versus 10 watersheds, we're adding more watersheds or water districts to compete with a limited number of grants, is what we're doing.
Well, as we've
That's
been
what
making,
Bowser's doing.
we're shifting away from the competitive grants program that we've had for years.
All grants are competitive. I hate to just way tax this the way it is.
Well,
All government
for the
entities
road.
live and die by grants.
For the road, you've received
Yeah.
now 2 watershed-based funding grants. That's
Yes.
where the direction we're going. So you get a set dollar amount. We ask for that from the legislature for each funding cycle. Make that a stable pot of funding to implement your plan going forward. So would be what you would look forward to for this watershed. Once your plan's completed, it's a stable pot of funding to implement your plan. How you guys decide to organize is a local decision. If you want to go the route of an entity that completely covers your planning area, that's an option. Or you can go the route of the root and Zumbro and do a collaboration. That requires you to identify one of your partners to be that fiscal agent to receive the funds, and then set up a system of sub-agreements to share the funding.
I understand that. But we're all going to compete with the grant. Sheila writes grants all the time. Over the years, again, if you add more, what do I say, applicants for a limited number of grants, only so many are going to get it. So unless there's more revenue that's going to automatically come up in the grant system, there's going to be more losers that have been established competing with the new watersheds.
I guess some other agencies will still have some small grant programs. Whether you apply for that through a new entity or your individual partners is up to you.
Well, that's just like government. You apply for all the grants you get. You talk about watersheds. Me and Steve deal with social services. It's endless grants, corrections grants, same old story. But you always compete against another entity to try to get these grants.
Right?
Correction, I just mentioned corrections. I compete corrections with the metro area, with Nicollet County. We're always competing for grants. And that will be the same principle here with watersheds. The more applicants you got, the more competition there is.
Adam, once it's in implementation stage, is there a role for the Whitewater Joint Powers Board to be a part of the implementation of the grant once it's completed?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an option that you guys can
Okay. And from what I understand, it's,
decide.
The voting hierarchy is being set up right now. That's what Winona County just went through. All your counties are gonna appoint members too. And so now, the new watershed boundary includes all this area from the Crescent up to Wabasha, basically. And it used to be, we were this island of Whitewater. If you think the Winona City Commissioners that are stacking this board are stacking it so that they don't give the money to Healthy Lake Winona and bring it up here, I think you're not seeing the full picture. They didn't ask us for a Whitewater Joint Powers, who do you want to sit on that board for a vote? They said, we're using county commissioners and SWCDs. Whitewater Joint Powers is not part of it. We haven't been asked to have a seat at the table.
So again, by sitting on the policy committee, your Winona County representative is representing the entire county board. The
Yeah,
policy committee is
See how that played out?
making recommendations, they're trying to speak on behalf of their entire board as they're developing this plan. But ultimately, when the plan is completed, and ready to be approved, it goes back to each individual partner. So each county board, each SWCD board, watershed district board to get approval. So you have one representative during that process,
yeah,
but
too. The city of Winona is to have a vote there too.
right, the city has a player
And
in
the
the
city,
watershed.
and the county commissioner.
I can't speak on behalf of your county politics. I can say it's the same.
That's how we were
playing
just
field.
asked to set it up. We voted on it Tuesday. Who are the representatives gonna be? The city gets one, and then the city lobbied the county commissioners, don't let it be a rural county commissioner, make sure it's a city county commissioner. So,
But again, that decision to adopt the plan goes back to your entire county board.
yeah,
So-
and it's made up of a majority of city commissioners. They have no interest in us rural people being part of that.
It also goes back to the SWCD board, who is made up throughout the rural ports.
That's the only representation we have left at this point. And I'm happy for that, but it certainly is being stacked differently.
Okay, then what? So this organization is in the stages of putting together this.
right,
Voting body.
trying to
voting
put
body.
together an informal policy committee meeting before the end of the year to kind of,
This is formal.
no, I'm talking about the first meeting is an informal meeting, just so that whoever's on the policy committee meeting get
But what
to
Winona
know.
County did was formal. That's, we
Right, I
formally
agree. That
placed
was-
the members of who's gonna sit on this committee. And Rochester's gonna do it too. And if
And Russia will do it too.
Yeah,
So,
But
But
Rochester's
I-
not in this watershed. It's for the Zumbro.
Russia will do the Zumbro
Mhm.
on there. So, obviously this is moving forward on that, so we'll have more information how this plays forward. But I'm telling you, Adam, I think the Whitewater, as the years go on, the Whitewater will be neglected, this board, where we'll be competing with other grants and all that stuff. I just think now we're evolving into an organization, these watersheds. We always talk about represent your local people. I don't think this is transforming that way anymore.
So
You're gonna have, again, you're gonna get your watershed districts, when you get the bigger cities involved, urban versus rural, more clashes on your watersheds.
But I mean, there's been that balance in the competitive grants.
I'm sorry, the balance gets all shifted in these politics. That's just what has happened. And I'm afraid this is going that way to the watersheds too. So.
I
The Wood
understand.
River was, again, the makeup was different. but now it's not, when you get the cities involved.
And it was the perfect scenario with one county sitting entirely in that
So-
watershed. It was easy to get support behind it because you had that one county right in the center. The rest of this is just so fragmented.
You know, obviously this is what people are doing. Now, do I think it's gonna be problems? I think you're gonna get problems. It all depends on the makeup of your communities, so.
I understand the concern and appreciate the comments. I think, like you said, it's a new process. You know, each watershed's going to operate a little differently, and likely come down to the decision makers. But
I don't know if you're familiar, but I get stuck with. I'm throwing other things in I've run into over the years, road projects, community projects that we're going to do for the county. But then when we go to a town, and it's Rochester, I have to get municipal consent to do anything in the towns because they have a certain legal right or status to get municipal consent. And we can't get nothing done. Or they become a first-class city, which is Rochester, and they have a whole new wave of statutes they throw at us to do anything. You're going to run into the same example in watershed districts when you try to do a project. And this group, we've done a lot of nice things over the years because we don't run into the statutes or logic that cities all of a sudden have the right to do if they get the right because of the statutes. So think about, I just let you know what I've run into over the years. Think about that. They'll even pull that on water projects. So.
And dovetailing with that, once cities or certain political figures, people that are elected, once they see large revenue streams available, like what Bowser's bringing forward here, all at once they're like, we've got city council members writing to our county board, sending multiple letters. You have to appoint a city commissioner. Don't let it be a rural commissioner. They see that revenue stream, and we're outvoted in the country, and it just played out, and that's how it's going to continue to go. We're going to have rural areas are going to have less and less of a seat at the table.
I understand that, but still, if you're concerned about the city of Winona, there's still representatives from each county, each SWCD, the Stockton, Rolling Stone Municipal Watershed District. So it's not the city gets all the decision making. They have a seat at the table, but so does each of those.
But why did they get
partners.
2 votes? In my part of the district, get 0.
By participating, they have 1 seat at the table.
They have 2.
Winona
The city
County
of Winona gets
decides
a
who
vote.
represents them on the policy committee.
What now?
When the Winona County Board made a decision on who represents them on the policy committee.
Yeah,
So
a city commissioner.
that will be
There's
speaking
no
on
rural
behalf of the
constituents in
entire
her
county.
district.
That will need to speak on behalf of the entire county.
Mm-hmm. And they have the city of Winona. They get a vote too.
They are part of the watershed. It's
So I'm just showing you that's how it's played out.
All right, well, okay, we got
It is what it is.
on there, but this Bowser has to, what do you want the future to look like? That's, and the power you have is the money. We all know that. So, you want the money, here's the rules. Now we're trying to figure out the rules, so.
I guess I can go and beg to my city commissioners to, bring some money out here.
So, all right, we'll hear more about this when you get together.
Okay.
Sheila, I'm sure you'll be at these meetings.
Yes, I will. Do you want me to give regular updates?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay.
Just email to us what the
Okay.
discussion is
All right.
on there. So, I'm sure the soil and water, the soil and water boards will get updates on it. They're on the list of people. So, I don't know, James, have you got anything? Soil and water, or anything about this?
Yeah, they were talking about it, going over the different options that were available as far as how to organize the whole thing. Which sounds like what you all were talking about anyway. Yeah, I mean, the decision hasn't been made per se
Yeah.
at this point, but.
Well, I have to ask a question. How did the Stockton Rolling Stone watershed, how did they get a seat at the table with a vote, but this organization not get a seat at the table with a vote? Who made that decision?
They are a watershed district. That's a special purpose unit.
What is this?
This is a joint powers board.
It's in statutes that the local, what's the term?
They're a local water management authority.
Okay, that includes SWCDs, counties, and watershed districts. And that's in Minnesota statute. So those are the ones that have to be at the
I
table.
don't have a problem with them being at the table. The problem with me is why are we not?
Rich, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Well, I don't know if you heard about there, we're talking about the Mississippi watershed agreement, the pros and cons of it. You got anything to add to that? What do you think about it?
Well, you guys pretty well kicked it around pretty good there, I think, so I really don't have much to add.
Okay. Did it make sense? Okay, Rich, thanks. All right, we'll hear more about this. Next one. I guess we're at agency reports. Adam, anything else in your world?
I would just mention we have, each year we do a Bowser Academy. It's usually a training session for staff. Obviously this year we needed to switch that up to be a virtual training event. So we're doing that October 27th through the 29th. So everything's online. We're just doing it in a couple sessions each morning. And I think registration closed last Friday on that. So looking forward to that at the end of the month.
Okay. Anything else we have?
I have
Sheila?
just a couple things. I got a notice from MCIT, an estimate of what our rates will be next year. It'll be $13.63 for property casualty and workers' comp, $50. So they said this is an estimate, so I will get the actual invoice at some point in December, and it'll be due the end of January. So I'll probably have to have an approval to pay this ahead of time before I get the invoice. And then one other thing, we have Kevin Keener, worked for the last couple of years. This is using his Field to Stream partnership data, and he worked with a videographer, and they put together a series of karst videos showing how groundwater moves through karst in the 3 different karst regimes in southeast Minnesota: the Bluffland karst, the karst, and then the till. So those are out in videos, and I didn't want to take up time today at the meeting, but I'll send out an email with a link, and you can view the videos at your convenience. They're very informative and very good, and we have posters to go with them. They'll be using them in schools, and also trying to adapt them to work with crop consultants to get to understand better how groundwater moves through the karst and how they can better meet the needs of their clients. So anyway, I'll send out that link so everybody can view it, but they're very good. I encourage you to take the time to click, and there's a series of videos.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, our next meeting, we need to talk about that because there's some
Right.
conflicts with some soil and water.
Yes,
So do we want to move that up a week? Would that work?
that does conflict with Winona SWCD. Theirs is the second Thursday. And I called here to see what, and they have their calendar for December is all open. So whatever day we pick, we'll work with them.
I don't know what's everybody's schedule. So it looks like the 17th does not work, correct?
Correct. That is conflicting with Olmsted and Wabasha SWCD.
So the 10th,
What about one day before, on the 16th?
actually, sorry with me.
I'm fine with any day, as long as it's not one of our meetings that we're supposed to have.
James, does that work for you?
16th, 9.
Okay?
Does that work, Sheila? Does that work for you?
Yep, that, I'm open anytime.
Okay, we'll just go with the day before,
Okay.
16th, on that. Anything else? If not, need a motion to adjourn. Rich, you got anything else to add? You want to adjourn?
Like you said, for the date, that's me.
I didn't miss you, Rich. The next meeting, we're talking Wednesday, December 16th. Does that work for you?
Yeah. Yeah, that should work, yeah.
Okay, that works for Rich. Otherwise, I need a motion for me, Rich, to adjourn. All right, Rich, second.
Second.
Second by James. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.
Okay. And then I'll bring these over to Matt and then you can sign.
Signs the checks.
Yep.